Welcome to the Tiger Interview Series.
In this episode, we have our Pittsburgh director, Tim Jones, speaking with Justin Shal of Pure Edge Performance. Justin works with our Pittsburgh players. In this conversation, they cover multi-sport athletes and making gains in the weight room. They also speak on how to find the right performance trainer who has your best interest at heart. Enjoy.
What's up, everybody? Tim Jones again, Rawlings Tigers Pittsburgh director here. We're excited to bring you an epic video today. We're kind of transitioning a little bit from the norm that we've worked on. This is our off-season time. So today we're going to focus a lot on strength and conditioning, performance and enhancement. We're going to cover some key topics here. We're excited. We got Justin Shal with us today as the owner of Pure Edge Performance Training. We'll get some of his details for you at the end here. He trains all of our 13 through 18U players here in Pittsburgh. So it's awesome. I've known Justin for years now. We have a much more in-depth understanding, and he has way more than I do, of the human body. So we're excited. Some of the topics we're going to cover today are what are some of the, the big overarching philosophies of strength and conditioning for players, in strengthening and conditioning players. What's your opinion on off-season training with coaches who aren't actually certified, and what's your take on multi-sport athletes? Huge things that we face here in Pittsburgh, and I know a lot of you guys face them across the country. So without further ado, what's up, Justin? Introduce yourself. Tell us, give us a little quick intro about yourself and what you're doing here.
All right, thanks, buddy. My name is Justin. I'm the owner of Pure Edge Training. Pure Edge is my brand. We started about 5 years ago. I have been in the specialized performance training industry for about 15 years now. So I've been around for a while. I've seen a lot of different things, and I've trained athletes my whole career. So over that time period, I've really kind of honed my skill in being able to adapt and work with athletes of different sports and specifically baseball, and trying to take into account the different considerations that each athlete needs geared towards what their sports are, what type of seasons they go through, in season, off season training, trying to incorporate the other types of stress that they see outside of our training, such as baseball lifting, baseball playing, academics, sleep, eating, all those things. We just kind of try and take all those things into account and mold together a good program for our athletes and help them do better on the field. That's our goal.
Absolutely, man. I love it. We go way back. We both got our masters from Cal U, which in Pennsylvania is like the mecca for strength and conditioning. And Bobby Sapezi, I mean, if you don't think that guy's nuts, but he builds people like us that focus on the human body. And we work a lot and work hard to teach our athletes proper form. I'm excited about this topic. I think it's a big one. I'm excited to get your take on this. I think this is a bigger topic than most people realize. To kind of preface it, there's a lot of videos out there. You touched about it with just speed and agility. When I always tell my parents, we start off by teaching kids how to run correctly, how to engage the proper muscles with our legs, because a lot of times they don't, or what we need to do with our arms, where a lot of times the kids don't. So kind of kicking off with a big topic here. What are some of the big overarching philosophies in strength and condition and in strengthening and conditioning a player? What different philosophies do you see out there when it comes to strengthening and conditioning specific baseball players today, or just players in general?
Well, I think number one, they have to move well. If they have poor shoulder mobility, as a throwing athlete, and they can't get their arm overhead very well, or if their hips are not very mobile, those things are all going to carry over into how they play on the field, how they swing, how they rotate, how they throw. So there's been a bigger focus, I think, over the last few years, in part to a guy named Zach DeCant. I'll give him props for this. He's the strength coach at TCU from the baseball team down there. He wrote a book called Movement Over Maxes. It's all about just moving well. We want to make sure athletes move. And if you take an athlete that doesn't move very well and you start to load them in squats and deadlifts and things like that, shoulder pressing, you're putting them at risk for injury. So first and foremost, there should be an evaluation process done with an athlete to determine how well they move. And if they don't move well, you need to figure out why and what you're going to do about that to fix it. So that's kind of our number one goal, is to make sure that our athletes are moving the right way. And like you said, we are big on form over load. So once we get them to move well, we can then start to teach them the right technique on shoulder pressing or squatting or deadlifting or lunging or whatever movement pattern we might choose in a program. As long as they're moving well, we'll make long-term progress. If an athlete doesn't move well, they're gonna do the exercises, but they're not gonna get the most out of it, and eventually they're really gonna max out on their weight far below what they could use and put themselves at greater risk for injury. So that's kind of one of the biggest things biggest things we focus on is just making sure that the movement is there, and the load is always dictated by the form. So again, if they can't move well or their form's poor, there's no point in pushing the weight. The maximum amount of weight an athlete can move really doesn't matter. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. Obviously a stronger athlete will be a better athlete, all else being equal, but at the same time, that athlete needs to be able to move that weight and move that load and go through the right movement patterns and engage the right muscle groups in the right sequence to get the most out of their movement and their performance.
Awesome take for parents to understand that movement matters, the same that you would want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on your kid to have hitting lessons so he's the next Mike Trout. Movement patterns are key. Why do you think, in your own words, it's so important for players and parents as well to understand those philosophies on the movement patterns instead of just let's go bulk up, let's get big?
Well, that's exactly it. Everybody wants to get that quick result, and be stronger and hit the ball 20 feet further, with minimal time and effort put into. But the movement stuff takes more time, and it's not the exciting stuff, right? I mean, you've seen through our training when your team's coming here, we spend a good 10 to 15 minutes in the very beginning with tons of ground-based movement, mobility exercises. And then we get to some more movement stuff, like on their feet, and then we get to some CNS stuff. So there's a progression of the warm-up that we want to go through. That stuff's not always the most exciting stuff to do. It's like, all right, I'm just sitting here rolling my hips back and forth. What's this going to do for me? So the immediate gratification is not there. It's something that takes longer to see the results for, but it is crucially important to make sure those things get into the program, and they're important. Now, I'm not talking about spending 2 hours on a foam roller, rolling around like an idiot and just wasting time. I mean, everything has a purpose and everything has intention behind it. But it's easy just to jump into and start squatting and doing the fun stuff. And I love that stuff too. But you kind of have to think backwards. Like, okay, I want to be able to do these things today, these exercises, X, Y, and Z. I need to go through warm-ups A, B, and C first to get to that point.
That's a good point. And I know we've mentioned this with some other players. I want to throw this in on this one question. There's some of the questions we get from parents are, my kid's injured. My kid's hurt. He has this or this. Should we come? You and I both saw it the very first week. There was a couple kids that were there that couldn't necessarily perform everything that was there that you were working with them on. And, my background, it's not as in-depth as yours. I was able to at least help them with certain things that they could do because they're like, oh, this is some stuff I do in PT. This is some stuff here. And CNS, central nervous system, like a lot of people don't think about like, oh, it's muscle memory. My body is functioning, firing, tell me to do this. There's a lot of things that you could do, whether you're injured or not, to still help yourself with the proper movements and recovery at the same time. So big aspect there. How do you think we could educate some of our players and parents on the essential need for working, and this is a big thing for me, with a certified specialist versus just anyone? And I want to propose this so we give a couple examples for our audience here where, questions that I get, I know you get the same thing. Well, we go to Anytime Fitness, Snap Fitness, whatever, whatever the gym is, LA Fitness, you name it, they're across the country. What's the difference? For me, I can explain certain levels of, well, they're not specifically certified in something. So for you as a CSCS, certified strength and conditioning specialist, where you can work college athletes and above, and then you also have the pairing of, well, we have a football coach who is teaching football lifting to all of our athletes just to make them stronger. We are unique to some other states where not just educators are coaches. They could sell two-way radios. They could sell insurance. They could do anything on the planet. And now they're the ones running strength and conditioning. And I could tell you a lot that I know personally. They just want time. They want time. They're looking at YouTube. They're printing off things that guys do, but they don't have the wherewithal or the background to go through that. And I give a lot of examples as to what some of the negative side effects are that could happen, but it's me, it's not you. So I'd love for you to kind of tackle on some of that. Like, how can we educate them on the need for working with someone certified, not just anyone?
Well, in this day and age, exercise science and performance training has progressed so much over the last 15 to 20 years. And there's so much more knowledge, and it's such a big industry now. And every athlete is training with somebody. There's a million trainers out there, just like baseball coaches. One issue I run into a lot, and I'm obviously a little bit biased because I own my own business, but is price shopping. If you're looking for the cheapest coach out there to do some strength training with your son or daughter, you're probably going to get cheap results, to put it that way. Anybody can go online and get a certification, that you take a little exam on and you print it off, and here you go, I'm a certified trainer. Let's train your kid. And you're just asking for trouble, and you're kind of wasting money because you're not going to get the same results that you would from a highly specialized, highly educated, and experienced coach. In my 15 years or so of training athletes, I have probably been asked less than 10 times by parents what my background is, what my qualifications are. I've got bachelor's degree in exercise science, master's degree, a couple of top certifications, and the experience to back up, and the results really too to back that up. And not enough parents really ask, like, hey, who are you? Why should I trust you? And trust is the key word there with my kid. And that's something that parents should just put a little bit more emphasis into. And just because their team's working with somebody, you should still ask questions. Everybody knows something about this, and we're in the information age. So most people can learn enough on the internet about strength conditioning just to be dangerous, in a way that, hey, they kind of know a little bit of stuff, but they're really quite not as versed as we are. And especially for a sport such as baseball, there are a lot of intricacies that go into shoulder health and core strengthening and things like that. So I think really it just takes a lot more education on the parents' part, and kind of wanting to know who's training their kid, who's worked with my kid. That makes a big difference. I've worked with a lot of coaches in my career that have had the credentials and the degrees, and they're just horrible coaches, to be quite honest. And I've also worked with some coaches in my career that don't really have the letters behind their name or the experience, but they were great people, and they really cared, and they were great with their clients, and they were great coaches. So, there's a spectrum, just like anything else. But I think there's definitely an art to coaching. It's important to know the science and have the background, and I'm a big believer in the education and continuing education. So you're always learning the new trends. So having that background is a good foundation. You have to have the science, but there's also an art to be able to work with people, to be able to kind of change things up on the fly. And maybe you have a workout plan for an athlete today, and they come in and they were up late last night, and they had a test today, and they're just stressed the heck out. And you just know what I had written for this kid today is just not going to fly. So I got to think on the fly, on my feet, to change it up, to be able to get something out of that athlete for today that's not going to kill them or, overwork them too much. And that just takes experience and thought and a genuine care for your athletes. And I think there's a lot of coaches out there that just don't have that. Like I said, this industry is so big today that there's a lot of people that just take advantage of that. Like, hey, I'm a trainer, like, give me your money. And there you go. You get the money, and that's it. So that's unfortunate, and parents just have to kind of be knowledgeable and do their research and weed things out. I would always recommend this. I would be more than happy to give any of my clients to talk to a parent. If a parent says, hey, can I talk to a parent of another kid? I would give you 10 names to talk to, and I would be confident that those 10 people would give you a glowing review of how we do things here. And if you have a coach that's not willing to do that, then that should be a red flag right there.
It's an interesting take, and it's a little mind-blowing at the same time, I guess, to an extent that little of a number asked you what your background is. It's crazy.
My mind, yeah, really.
I want to kind of compare this to on the mindset level of getting our audience and our players and more so our parents to kind of start thinking this way. So I'm going to dive into our next segment here and pair it with how they think about baseball coaches. Okay. So it's ironic. Like, we try our best to explain to our parents, like, listen, just because this guy played pro ball doesn't mean he could coach your kid at all. He may never connect with your athlete, because a lot of times when you get to that high level and you've done the repetitive things so many times, you forget some of the intricate details that are essential. And then you just expect the players to be able to do that instead of connecting on their level, or they talk too high. And I always press my parents to say, like, hey, ask your kids why. When I ask your kid why he does something, if he can't explain it to me, he's just doing the emotions and the actions that he's being told to do. He doesn't actually understand it. So that means he's not digesting what's being taught to him. And there's different levels, like you have a pitching coach, you have a hitting coach, you have a catching coach. And there are guys that got hurt and never made it to the highest levels. There's guys that got hurt in college. I'm one. There's guys that got hurt before they even got to college, but they ended up coaching, and they put all their eggs in one basket to go out there and mentor kids. And I mean, halftime it is a therapy session, because if life is hitting them hard, what you're trying to accomplish, it's not going to happen. So how do you mix up on a fly? You have to know that player. You have to know what their body is capable of at the same time. And you can't make cookie cutter athletes with a swing, right? Like, I can't do that. So there's different levels. So, I kind of want to touch on this just to express this notion of educating our audience here is, what's your opinion on off-season training with coaches who aren't certified? Right now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. You got NASM. We both went to Cal. That's like prereq 100 that you have to take, so you're certified. I think it's a great program. I think doing it in a classroom setting for a whole semester is even better instead of just, oh, I'm going to skim through and pass my test. Now I can go train. You also have, other avenues to become a trainer. You're working at a traditional gym. A lot of times, and it's not a knock, like I know some younger trainers that really want to work with younger people like our age. We're not that old, but we're still up there a little bit. And then they work with some of the geriatric population. So, they can adapt, but it's not specialized. It's just generalized and broad, right? So you have those types of people. Then you have your high school coaches that we talked about, et cetera. What's your opinion with players, and what advice can you give some of our parents to start to ask some of those questions so that way they can trust that person? You don't want a dentist to perform open heart surgery, right? So, just because it says doctor doesn't mean he's a doctor, right? So how do you ask those questions, or how can you get them to kind of think to ask some of these questions or to notice certain things?
I might see an athlete a month at a time or a couple weeks at a time, then they're out. They might come in after their season and they have 6 weeks of downtime. I get 6 weeks with them, and then they're gone. So there's so many different factors and variables that need to go into a program and to what I'm going to do with an athlete for 1 week or 2 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever it might be. I'm thinking about, like I said, their stress outside of here, how much volume they're getting on the field, on the mound, or if they're a pitcher, how much are they throwing each week? What other lifting sessions are they doing with other coaches at home, in the basement, at LA Fitness, wherever? What is their nutrition like? What is their sleep schedule like? And all of those factors play into how I train my athletes and how I program for them. It's a lot, really. It's a lot to think about. And I don't know, and I'm not knocking any coaches outside of here, but if everybody takes into account all of those factors, and that's truly how we get the results that we achieve with our athletes, because and why they love coming to us, I think, and they see that we care. And it's not just, hey, you know what, we're going to bench today. I don't care. Just let's do it. There's always a constant evaluation process going on through each workout. And, we're always trying to evaluate and see, okay, what's going to get us the best results today? And it may not be what I had planned, like I said earlier, but it's going to be something that's going to at least make their time worthwhile and make sure that we're not overworking them. A big philosophy in the industry today is the least effective dose, meaning we want to do the least amount of work we need to with an athlete to get the effective results without killing them. We want to kind of edge that line a little bit, but not go over the line, because we're going to hinder recovery for tomorrow, for the next day, for next week. And we don't really want to tap into their recovery. Recovery is very important, but we want to make sure we can do what we can with them to get the results that we want to get that day. And like I said, I think, finding a coach that's going to work with an athlete in a individualized or at least personalized setting, maybe in a small group, so they can individualize the workout to that athlete is very important. You're not going to get that in a team setting or a team lift situation, because the workout's going to be designed for the group, for the herd. And athletes A, B, and C might get a lot out of that. Athletes E, F, and G may not get quite so much out of that, because it's above their capacity, or it's way below their capacity. So that's why I think it's important to make sure that your workouts are kind of specialized, so you can take into account all those factors I mentioned, and also make sure that the workout is going to be just right where you need it to get the results that you want.
What would you consider, and what do you do for more of a baseball specific workout? And at the end, I'd love for you to explain like exactly what a CSCS is, because I know I get this question a lot, and it's not just a trainer, it's a specialist. They can work with college level athletes and above. People in the industry understand it, but a lot of our parents don't. They're just like, what's the difference? It's a trainer. So if you could kind of just explain what a CSCS is and why we send our players to you, but then touch on some of these baseball specific workouts, so that way our audience can understand and our players can understand, like, yeah, I should be doing this when I'm working out with my baseball team right now. We're not doing any of that. Just to give them an idea and a visual.
Yeah, so I'll start with the CSCS thing. So yeah, CSCS means Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist, and that is through the NSCA, which is the National Strength and Conditioning Association. That's kind of the gold standard for training athletes. Almost universally, any collegiate strength coach at any level of a collegiate program would have a CSCS certification. That's kind of like just the most highly accepted certification there is. It's very hard to get. You have to have a degree to even take the exam. It's a pretty lengthy exam, and it's a difficult one. So for me personally, I took that exam right after I finished college 15 years ago. And it was pretty much a long time ago. It was pretty much the latter couple years of my exercise science degree in one book, one preparation manual for this exam. So it encompasses a lot of things. So it prepares you well to work with athletes of all ages. But yeah, for the collegiate level, that's kind of the standard. Below that, there's some other ones. There's the NASM, which I both have. They have a performance enhancement specialist certification. I had that as well, and they have some other kind of specializations. And there's a few other like ACSM. There's one other ACE. They're a little bit more towards like medical populations, things like that. So there's a couple that are really geared towards athletes. So I think that's important just from a standpoint to show that, hey, I'm a professional. I really care about my career, my education enough to take this exam that's not cheap. And, I put time and effort into studying for it to show you that you see that I have these letters behind my name to say, look, I am legit trying to make this into a career. This isn't a hobby for me. I'm not working, putting up houses on the side and then I come in and train kids a couple of days a week just because I feel like it. It's my hobby. Like for me, this is my career. I put the time and energy and effort into marketing myself as such. So that's why it's so important, to kind of have that. And that's really where that comes from. And the CSCS has kind of been the gold standard as far as training athletes for a few decades now. So that's kind of it's hung around and it's still up there.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like going to a doctor, right? Like you specialize. You want to go to someone that knows it. Just like with teaching. If you're a college professor, I'm going to go to that person for advice or help or tutoring, etc. Same thing. Continue.
And then as far as like a baseball off-season workout. This time of year, we're far removed from any competition season. And so, a knowledgeable coach would understand the difference between something we call GPP, which is general physical preparation. This time of year right now, I don't really care how hard a kid throws or how hard they rotate. We should be working on building lean muscle tissue, putting on some weight, getting stronger in the basic movement patterns. Like I mentioned earlier, make sure they're moving well. If you don't move well now and you wait till March or April to try and start moving well, you're already too late. So now's the time to make sure that you're moving well, you're healthy, your joints are moving symmetrically, you don't have imbalances, and you're just kind of putting on lean muscle and working on just becoming a better athlete. We don't get too specialized into any movement patterns such as rotational things or throwing medicine balls like that right now. We want to make sure athletes are just getting stronger and just healthy and moving well. And as we get closer to the season, we will start to build in more specialized exercises such as reverse lunges for a pitcher. They spend a lot of time on one leg kind of driving through that hip. So that's something we would incorporate at a heavy load, low reps to build a lot of hip strength and hip extension strength to carry over into the pitching off the mound. So as we get closer into the season, we would call that SPP, specialized physical preparation, where you're starting to build more unique and more common movement patterns into the workouts that will carry over to the field more exclusively.
It makes a lot of sense because I know a lot of guys are like, I got to get my shoulder strong. I got to do this. I have to do this. Or, we explain, we do a lot of stuff with our legs and our core. Our core is our entire midsection, not just our abs. You can't completely omit obliques. You can't omit your lower back. Like there's key aspects that one thing triggers and affects another thing. If your goal is to have a higher exit velocity on your swing, you're going to have to start using your legs. Like I do things with resistance bands and med balls with my more advanced hitters. And they're like, wow, I've never used my legs like this before. I'm like, yeah, it's because they're muscles and then they're sore. I'm like, they're muscles that you recruited that you never knew that you had to use. So now you understand that feeling. These are the muscles you have to start to work on. So they tend to forget a lot of those things. They tend to forget certain aspects where our core matters a ton, especially with pitching. So you want to throw harder. Don't just go out there and throw and join a million programs under the sun or spend thousands of dollars on a pitching coach necessarily. You got to build the body first. Your car doesn't run if you don't put gas in it. It just doesn't, right? So kind of pairing those things together where you talked about the SPP and, when you get closer to the season with specific training, what do you notice? I notice certain things on mine on the baseball side, but what do you notice as far as risks that players and more so parents tend to overlook? And I kind of wrote down a couple areas that I see more than not, and you can correct me if I'm wrong or throw more in. I talk more about injury, overuse, recruitment of incorrect muscles, regression, which you have to work back to your main stable ground before you can even go forward, which takes even longer. Those are some of the bigger things. And it's more of improper form will recruit improper muscles. And then now you're not getting the maximum benefit that you deserve, that you need. And it's just proper movement patterns, right? So what are some of these risks that parents seem to overlook, and how can we educate them to kind of assess those things as well as they can?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head with the overuse thing. You know, baseball is a very, very overused common sport because you're throwing. So I think a lot of athletes don't take enough time, maybe even just 2 weeks after a season of downtime. Don't throw. Just lift lightly, build some strength in your shoulder, trying to correct any imbalances that you've developed over a season. But when you're throwing, you know, hundreds of times and thousands of times over a season, you're going to develop some tightness in that shoulder, you know, and the internal rotators. And you kind of have to correct that and stretch and work on the external rotators and you know, kind of restore that balance to the shoulder musculature. And I think that the recovery is something that's so far overlooked. And that's just kind of a culture of today's sports culture. And that's just the way it is. But I think trying to make sure that the baseball player takes a little bit of time to recover and gets into an arm care program, such as with you guys or like what we do, to make sure that they are building strength back into that shoulder and into the core. And like I said earlier, restoring balance to their body to make sure that when we get back into the more specific things into the spring, that they're ready to handle those things again. If you never give your time to recover, and if you're always got these nagging injuries, then you know, it's going to creep up at the worst part of the season. I'll give you an example real quick. I had an athlete who is now a college baseball pitcher up at Case Western Reserve. I won't say his name, but hard-ass worker, like worked hard all the time, came in here and busted his ass in the gym, and we loved working with him, but always went 1,000 miles an hour and had chronic injuries creeping up all the time. And it was very hard to get through his head, like, hey, we got to back off a little bit. And I remember one year, a few years ago, he was pitching in his basement. They built like a pitching mound in his basement at home. And he had a lat injury in February, and he didn't want to slow down. And I'm like, dude, it's February. If your lat is hurting you and strained in February, and you're not going to take care and fix that now, by the time we get into March and April and May, you're going to be like toast because you're never giving yourself time to recover. So I think that's really important to make sure that in your off-season training, I'm not saying don't play baseball, but you just have to be smart about it and not – that's not your competition time. That's your time to get better, to get stronger, to get faster, and to get healthy, really. So making sure that you're taking time to address your health and everything's moving well and you're not pushing yourself through injuries in December, January, February. Get that stuff fixed, and then you can kind of push harder to the spring.
It makes sense. You know, like know your body, know your bounds. You know, we love the mentality of just run through a wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are times where you have to recognize, hey, listen, I got to take a step back. I got to get myself healthy enough to physically go through the wall instead of just get my upper half or my lower half through the wall, right?
Listen to your coaches.
Yes.
We know what we're doing. We're here for a reason.
It's a cool little aspect. And I kind of want to throw a couple things out there and just get your takes on them kind of quickly for you. And for us is the way that we kind of propose like our throwing program, right? Like November, we call it like it's our dead month. We do arm care for 4 weeks. Like you have to take enough time to stop throwing, but if you take too much time off, then it starts to hurt you. And then we also do throwing programs and progressions because a lot of kids just want to go 100 miles an hour and they just go balls to the walls, if you will, and they don't care. They're going to throw themselves out without proper body movements. You know, we touched a couple of times now on the CNS and proper movements, right? It's a big aspect, especially when it comes to pitching. So like our arm care, like our velocity program, it's, you know, Coach Page, he has a background in strength and conditioning and performance enhancement. You know, he's a physician's assistant in sports medicine now. You know, we actually are very lucky and fortunate to have you, him, and myself that know the human body. I'm not going to throw Nick under the bus, but when we talk human body, he's like, I'm just going to draw pictures on the table at lunch because I don't know what you're talking about. But it's funny, you know, like we do that for a reason because the proper movements matter. And it's not a race. It's, you know, you have peer pressure from your teammates if you're lifting in a team setting, just to lift, go all the way. Come on, man. Like, let's go. I can lift 220. I could bench press 400. Like, it's irrelevant to your body and what you're doing depending on that time frame, right? Like, don't succumb to it. And then now you also see it on social media. There's a lot more peer pressure now on social media where we see kids take bands and they're like they're doing this. I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
hold on.
Yeah.
This muscle back here is this big, and that's what stops your arm from ripping off your body when you're trying to throw 90 miles an hour. So we got to take care of that. You don't take care of that, you're not going to throw 90 miles an hour. You're not going to throw it all. So now you're putting the stress here, and in your elbow. There's specific movements that we're doing to get them to understand that it works from the ground up. You're throwing with your legs. You're not throwing with your arms. You throw with your legs, work that up into your entire core. That way, now when you go through the conditioning and the strength training that we're giving you, continue to do that. Now your arm's here. That's all you're doing. That's all you're doing. And people are like blown away that their kid adds like 4 miles an hour to their fastball just by using their legs. I'm like, it's proper movement. It's functional training is what it is. And kind of throwing in an extra piece like Nick. I love teaching Nick as much as we can, and he's learned a ton. And when I was working with some of the guys that were hurt, I was going through like the one kid, he's got, bad knees. I mean, welcome to my life. This is what we do. But I was trying to give him some of the things that I would do on like decompression days. And Nick's like, what did you just say? I said, it's a decompression day. He goes, dude, at college, all of us pitchers had a decompression day. Like we have to have those. And they kept stressing how important it was. I never really understood why. And he started doing some of the workouts. He was like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. So just understanding your own body, and it's okay to have those moments because you can't go 100%. Arms are gone 70% before the kids even feel it or realize it. There's certain body movements that, again, movement patterns that we can tell when your kid is now throwing with his arm more than anything else, when he's starting to get tired, when we need to take him out. But just understanding that, like decompression, stretching. I can't tell you how many kids don't stretch. I can't tell how many kids I tell to do yoga just to get flexible. It's mind-blowing how those key pieces aren't always paired up with the strength and conditioning side of it and how it can help your body, but you also have to recognize what's going on with it. Don't just neglect it and go. Those are some key things I think would help our parents get more involved into it, asking the right questions and really focusing on those things, because it's always when they get hurt, when they have that regression or rounded shoulders because they don't work back ever. And it's like, oh, I can't throw like I used to. Those are some key things. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Like now that, just me explaining, like there's college programs that just take their pitchers to do a decompression day because they have to reset their bodies. Like, what's your take on some of those things? How important is it?
Well, those recovery days are important. Yeah, I mean, you as much as you want to come into the gym and have the best workout every single time, some days it just doesn't happen. And you have to kind of recognize that when it's happening, and like I said earlier, do what you can to get something out of that session. It's not a waste of time, but you may not have the capacity to be able to put in the effort for what you wanted to that day. If you had a rough game or a long week or a bad week of sleep, you're just not going to have the type of workout that you want. So to be able to do that recovery and decompression workouts and just kind of take a step back, that's probably more important for your long-term recovery than what am I going to get out of this workout right now today. And I think something that I've been using the word a lot, intent, with our athletes a lot lately, just making sure that when they do the workouts, even if it's a light workout, you still have to put intent behind every movement. And that's something it's hard to convey because some kids just don't quite get it. Some kids do. Even if you're just doing band pull aparts or an easy band warm up, there needs to be intent. Like you said, kid just kind of yanking that band back and forth. Number one, puts some potential for injury. And number two, it just doesn't really address the muscle and the movement pattern in the right way. And so we're very big on making sure there's intent behind every movement. And even, like I said, even if it's a light day, you can still get something out of it to make sure that you're moving your body in an intentional way to get something out of that exercise.
I'm so happy you used that word intent. We use it, I can't tell you how many times. I think it's embedded into my brain. I might tattoo it on my forehead so I can understand intent. Like, there's a reason why we do this. There's a reason why we do everything. Once people start to understand the intent, they start to understand our culture a little bit more, and then they start to see things differently because now they're understanding that there's an actual process to why we're doing something instead of just, oh, here's ball, here's bat, go hit off a tee. No, have intent. Work on what you need to work on. Same thing in the gym. Don't rush through something. Feel it. Understand it. No,
I'll use like the example of like a medicine ball throw, like a scoop toss. It's similar to swinging a baseball bat, and we do those a lot with our baseball players, especially kind of prepping for the season. And it's so easy just to grab a ball and just go up there and kind of like just throw across your body. But you're going to get so much more out of it if you learn how to kind of push off your back hip and drive from the back leg and step into your front hip and rotate that force from hip to hip, which is going to come out through the core and through the arms and into the ball, which is what happens when you swing a bat. So that intent makes such a huge difference in what you get out of the exercise. Anybody can take a ball and just throw it against the wall. but it takes a really concentrated athlete that's been coached well to be able to be mature enough to intentionally throw it in the way that is going to carry over into their baseball swing or to throw.
Yeah, they're going to feel the muscles that are there intently that are being used, and they're going to understand how their body starts to work. Those are the kids that excel the most, in my opinion.
Yep.
And we're starting to get more and more. We got awesome numbers this year, which is great. They're starting to understand that more and more. Kind of taking this into, and I'm pretty sure you know my stance on this. I think I have a pretty well versed idea of your stance on this. The final topic I want to kind of touch on is multi-sport athletes, and a big reason why I want to touch on this is because a lot of people tend to believe that you have to specialize right now. You have to specialize as a freshman. You have to specialize in certain things earlier and earlier and earlier if you have a goal of going somewhere else. And a lot of people say like, hey, a kid specialized baseball his whole life. That's why he's going pro. I mean, look at Pat Mahomes. Look at, all these other players like Russell Wilson or, Murray. These guys are multi-sport athletes for a reason. But then there's also this crazy debate over, should you specialize in one sport versus playing multiple sports? What's your stance on the topic? Where do you stand on that?
We obviously want kids to play multiple sports. I mean, they're going to develop such a better movement capacity and to use the term movement intelligence, to be able to move your body in different ways on the field, on the court, whatever sport you're playing, will carry over and spread across all sports. And again, from the overuse standpoint in a sport like baseball, if you have a kid that starts playing baseball, exclusively baseball from 8 or 9 years old, and they're just throwing, and they don't play anything else, it's baseball all year round, they're going to get hurt. I remember a few years back, I had a kid that I trained in a different capacity who I want to say was maybe 10 or 11 at the time and had Tommy John surgery by the time he was 12 because he just threw all the time and all he played was baseball. And he was kind of a wiry kid, so he just didn't have the musculature and the joint maturity to support that much throwing. And, it didn't turn out well for him to be a kid that young to have that kind of surgery. Definitely playing multiple sports will help a kid develop their movement capacity, their movement intelligence, being able just to see things on the field and adjust and think about what they're seeing and just being able to be a better athlete in general. And really, I don't think a kid should specialize until they're, upper levels of the high school, whenever they're really starting to look at colleges and, if they're really, really stand out, maybe a little bit sooner. But, I've parents of 9-year-olds calling me to say, oh, they're a great athlete. Like they're the best on their team. They're really special. And it's like, I know my kid is too, but they're all special, right? They're all special today. So
yeah,
but those kids, they need to play more sports to get that exposure to different movement patterns, and even just from a social standpoint, to learn skills, to be a person and a kid, meet different people and different teams and be able to take instructions from different types of coaches. Football coaches are very different than basketball coaches and baseball coaches. Every coach has their style. So it just helps develop a more well-rounded athlete from youth to hopefully professional, if they're good enough, to be able to just play multiple sports. And, you hear all the time watching, especially the NFL, guys like Julian Edelman, who played soccer growing up, and just how much quicker they are on their feet and how quickly they can see and read the game. And those things have been developed from a young age.
I like that. I think this is kind of the last big question that I got for you. I think if we think of specific sports, like big time athletes, pro athletes, there's a unique way that they kind of paired up two sports, right? Mm-hmm. Not saying that they played, they're not playing golf in the fall and then going into basketball, then going into baseball all spring and summer, and then just playing anything under the sun, like Reggie Bush, amazing track star, track athlete, incredible running back, right? You talked about Edelman. He played soccer, quick feet, quick vision, can see the field. That incredibly and immensely helped that man become what he became on the football field. And it shows, right? Very, very high level athletes, which, what multi-sports or what sports do you think would be the best to kind of pair up? And I say this because we have some guys that they'll just play anything under the sun just to play, or they're like, oh, it's my senior year, I'm going to play everything I possibly can. Yeah. Kind of like how you mentioned, like you got to know when to take a break. Can you give us a couple good examples of what sports to pair up that might help overall? Like my opinion would be like, okay, let's not do shot put at the same time we're trying to play baseball. Two completely different arm motions. Javelin, it's the same arm motion, not really taking a break, and they're usually in the same season. So you're just going to just amplify your throwing motion, right? Like there's certain things that counteract each other. There's certain things I think actually help the body a little bit more so than what some people think. What's your take on that, or what some examples can you give us?
I think a sport like basketball would carry over well to everything. Soccer as well. Basketball, you're jumping. You have to display a lot of leg power. You have to be able to sprint and stop and be agile. You use both sides of your body. It's not one-sided like hockey. I would say sports that don't pair well together would be something like baseball and hockey, or baseball and golf, where you're going to be doing the same movement patterns, right? You're going to be doing the same rotational patterns and putting the same general stress on your body that you would be in a baseball season. I think something that would be different than that would go well together, like basketball, like soccer. So you're doing different movement patterns. If you were to do something like track, I think track is awesome because you're going to learn to sprint, particularly if you have a good coach. You'll learn how to run better. You'll be in shape and in condition for baseball season, whatever it's going to be. So I think those sports go well together to make sure that you're going to carry those movement qualities into your baseball season.
I appreciate that. That's good information. I know some of our
and
parents
lifting too.
like
Just
that.
get strong. Come to the gym and lift.
You got to get strong. No matter what
Okay,
you
man.
do, you got to get strong. So what I want to do now is I kind of want to just do a quick recap and a quick closing. I know we've mentioned movement patterns a lot because it's incredibly important. The nervous system needs these aspects that gets overlooked quite a bit. So if you could sum up some of the best advice you could give a high school player preparing for the season and dreaming to play in college, what would it be? And I'd also like you to give yourself some kudos, because how many of your athletes are prepared at the next level when they get there? Kind of toss that in at the end as well. So give them your advice and explain why they train with you and what your goals are when they actually get to college.
My advice would be find a good coach, whether that's baseball coach such as you guys, or it's a good strength coach such as what we do here. A good coach that has knowledge and the experience to get you to that level can make such a difference, versus just going to LA Fitness with your buddies, or my dad used to lift. He knows some stuff, that's cool for dad. But like I said earlier, the knowledge and the technology and the science of what we do has grown so much in the past 10 to 20 years. I had a father, his son started training with us recently, and the dad's like, hey, I want him to do like a push, pull, lower day, push, pull, lower. That's kind of the rotation. That's a great rotation. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's kind of an old school bodybuilding way to train. And that's not exactly the best way for an athlete to train. So the best advice I can find is give yourself, find a good coach that is reputable and has a good background, a good experience, and, has the results. Like I said, ask them who they train, how they got them there, and talk to those people and say, what did you think of this coach? Do you recommend that? That's definitely the number one piece of advice I can give you. You can learn all you want online and read these programs, but that's what we do. That's my career. I've spent 15 years doing this. My other coaches have been here for 5-6 years. So we spend all our time eating, breathing, thinking about lifting and getting our athletes stronger. I lay in bed thinking about it every night. So that's what we do. I put every effort I have into every kid that I have here. So, and to kind of segue from what you said earlier, we have done a great job of preparing our athletes for college, whether it's how they eat well, how they lift, the right movement patterns, the right technique, how to assess if this workout calls for 5 sets of 10 or 10 sets of 5, how does that change the load that you're going to select? Where we're going to go from this month's progression to the next month's progression. So my athletes are well versed in that, and they know that. And based on the feedback that I get from them, they're almost universally one of the best, most fit freshmen going into their programs. They have the best form. They can progress weights better. Their strength coaches trust them more in the weight room than other kids who have not done strength training. And we're in an area where the athletes here are blessed to be able to have someone like us here, and this industry is so big now that, there's coaches everywhere. So find a good coach. When we were kids, this wasn't a thing. You might have had a dad or an uncle or a coach that kind of knew some stuff about lifting, but that's just kind of their knowledge from lifting in the 80s and 90s, which is far beyond what we do now, what we know now. So find a good coach and ask them about their results and who they work with, and go from there.
But Justin, I can't thank you enough. I know we talked quite a bit. I know we're going to do some more down the line, and I'd love to kind of chat with you in season, because a lot of our guys forget that they can actually work out in season. Yep. And how helpful and beneficial it is. So we're going to be doing another one. So make sure you check that out once we get closer to the season here. Justin, if you don't mind, you got your brand, your logo on your shirt there. If you would be willing and interested to just share, either your email address, the website, etc. That way, our parents and players can reach out to you, and even some other directors. I know some other directors kind of pick my brain on what do we do with our training in the off season. And when I mentioned this, they're like, "That's incredible. I'd love to do that." Well, we don't do it in house. We go and we outsource it to the guys that know what they're doing. So, feel free to give your information there. And thank you so much for coming on. It's huge information that our guys need to know.
Yeah,
And
of course.
girls.
I'm happy to do it. Thanks for having me. Our website's pureedgetraining.com. You can find us at Pure Edge Training on Instagram. I kind of do most of my social media through Instagram. I'm kind of inconsistent with how I do it, but feel free to reach out to us, DM me. You can email info@pureedgetraining.com. I'm happy to give anybody advice. I do like a little Q&A blog on my Instagram here and there, so I'm happy to give as much advice as I can to anybody. We've done some remote programming for people like over COVID, so whatever I can do to help out Rolling Tigers and your guys and just in general, that's what I'm here for. So feel free to reach out to me.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, man.